Good evening, adventurers. In tonight's tale, we encounter that guy in our writer's first ever Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And that guy turns out to be a rather interesting person. Let's get into it. Tonight's tale is called Caleb the Psychic Vampire and his character, the Nameless Ranger. A long time ago, when I was 14, I got a 3.5th edition Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide from an older cousin who just got some nicer books. I spent the next 4 years memorising that thing and wanted to play so bad my little brother and I would stay up and just narrate D&D-like stories instead of sleeping. So naturally, when I was 18 and a chance to play appeared, I jumped on it, and I was undaunted when nobody wanted to be the Dungeon Master, and it fell to me. I was pumped. My story was kind of lame, but the party were just so very violent that it didn't matter if the parties had depth or not. And the players were new enough that being big damn heroes was more than enough for them. So we all had a blast chasing around a summoner who would regurgitate lumps of flesh that quickly grew into the monster of the week, seizing and becoming kings of a goblin town, and so on. The only hitch in the game was Caleb, not his real name. He was 34, and he said he couldn't find any good dungeon masters anywhere in our state. I'd known him tangentially for a couple of months at this point, and was on the fence about him joining up, since he had a tendency to want to be more special than everyone else in the real world, and I was worried how that would translate. But frankly, he had the whole complete series, all 3 monster manuals, everything, and told me he'd let me borrow them while the campaign was ongoing, because he'd been playing so long that he wouldn't need them. Caleb had a few specific traits worth mentioning at this point, for context. He claimed to be a psychic vampire, feeding on the emotions of others. I never saw him once without him wearing a floor-length trench coat that was a Walmart special and fit awfully. It was too big on his shoulders and not big enough to keep his stomach from poking between the buttons. I'm not shaming him, I'm a fat dude myself, but find something that fits, my guy. He really wanted to buy his way into my friend's group, buying gifts and movie tickets and stuff for a group of 17 to 20-year-olds. He had the truest of neckbeards. His facial hair refused to grow anywhere north of his chin, but created a soft layer down his neck. As things go, he wanted to start the game off as a storm giant. Not half giant, not a homebrew race, but full-on giant using the monster stat block. 200 hit points, combat rating 13. He also wanted to haul the party's wagon around behind him to gain strength passively as he went. He didn't mean as good roleplay justification for why he put points into strength. He just wanted a free point in it every couple of game weeks. I told him that wouldn't work, and he was nonplussed. He ended up slapping together a human ranger who he refused to name. He said his character had never talked to another person in his life, and refused to be addressed by any name. How he spoke common was beyond me, but alright. The party had to call him something, so they came up with a series of nicknames that he got sour at, eventually settling on the unhappy compromise of being called Ranger. Ranger was a big old Billy badass, standoffish with the party, hitting on our 2 female members, because that's what his character would do, but he was personally so disgusted, he said, and threatening to attack allies if they didn't do what he wanted. Despite being spec'd for melee dual wielding, Caleb only ever used one big sword, and otherwise decided to try and play sniper. About 4 sessions in, he came to me after the game and asked if I could redo his character for him to be better at ranged. I agreed and redid it real quick for him. Things were good enough for a couple of sessions, until he changed his mind again and wanted to be a dual wielding ranger again. I obliged hesitantly, and we got back to it. After some party drama involving him refusing to save the cleric he personally didn't like, he decided he didn't trust the party and wanted the safety of distance. He asked for me to redo his character 12 sessions in for the 3rd time, and I said fine, but it's the last one. It wasn't the last one. Despite me remaking him as ranged, he decided to just rush at enemies recklessly with 2 swords he was awful with, because his character knew he was hated. Surprise, he asked me to remake his character for the 4th time, and sweetened the pot by saying he'd give me all of his D&D books, because they don't matter. Because he stole them all anyway. I figure he's paying me like $300 to remake his character, so I happily do so. The final act in this tragedy was upon us. The party found a potion they discovered was a potion of changing. When it opened, every being within a 20-foot radius rolled a D100 and became the race or creature that the dice landed on. It wasn't balanced, but it was my first game, so whatever. Ranger decided he didn't care anymore and sprinted up to a blue dragon in its desert lair and unplugged the stopper instead of throwing it or something like I had intended. I rolled for the dragon. It got Invisible Stalker. I rolled for Caleb. He got Huge Water Elemental. At this point, me and everyone else had been of the opinion we were done with him as a person and a player both. So, when he threw a fit saying, "I'm a water elemental in a desert, so I die, I guess," nobody corrected him. I said, "Sure, Caleb, you're dead. Now please leave." He said he would when he got his books back. I made a show of looking around the room, including a stack of my newly acquired books, and informed him that he didn't appear to have brought any books. He got in my face and yelled about how I stole from him and thieves are scum. I just told him to get out. He stomped off and I never saw him again. So, there we have it. The tales of Caleb the Psychic Vampire, a true warrior to the very end. One thing I have to say to all budding dungeon masters out there: if one of your players offers you something, be it money, books, or anything you'd want, in order to allow them to do something, even if it's just changing character, say no. Things like that always come with strings. A gift is a gift when it's freely given and doesn't come with requests. Have any of you played with a real psychic vampire? Assuming you survived the ordeal, how did it go? Let me know in the comments, I read them all. And if you enjoyed the content, consider liking and subscribing as it helps me a great deal. That's all I have for this evening. Good night.